questions. I don't know if people want to, there are refreshments out in the hall. We can take some formal questions and then make it informal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
How did you acquire the genetic material from the cemetery?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting story. Basically, they found the skeletons. They were like, oh wow, there's skeletons in the ground.
And they is whom?
Basically it was a construction project. They were removing the barn from that area. They were clearing it up because it was an old barn. And they found the skeletons and they contacted the authorities who contacted their authorities and so on. And eventually they were suggested to be DNA tested to determine the origin. Now, it was only then that the community was identified as belonging to Jews. And from that point, the team working on this contacted rabbinical authorities to ask, like, how is it best that we do this? And basically there's a Rabbi Litka based out of Jerusalem that ruled on this case and basically said that they can't use most of the skeleton and they need to be reburied, but they can use loose teeth. That was like the loophole, and that was the way that we were actually able to get the genomes sequenced and revealed to the public. Yes?
Where is the genetics of Kohanim fit into all this?
Yes, so I'll slide back to one of the original, or one of the earlier slides. This lineage here is together the third largest lineage in Ashkenazi Jews, and it's in fact the lineage that most Ashkenazi Kohanim belong to. If you are familiar with kind of old genetic studies, this lineage, which is the modern parlance word for it, used to be called the Cohen modal haplotype. And this is the basis of that, and it's incredible actually. This lineage is only 1,300 years old or so, but it descends from a group of Jewish Kohanim from many different communities that have a most recent common ancestor in the First Temple period. Probably genuinely a line of a priest of the First Temple period that survived significantly in several Jewish populations in the world. And this is just one of the the Ashkenazi lineages within that larger Jewish lineage. It just happens to be the biggest one, and that's why it appears here. Yes?
You mentioned you have some collaborating partners. Which universities?
Yeah, actually, I'm not affiliated with any university right now, though I am working with a study that is coming out of a collaboration mainly based from Harvard, working on a paper with them, but I'm not currently affiliated with anyone. My collaborators are, like me, just genuine hobbyists, people who love it, people who are passionate about it, and want to learn more. Yes?
Hello, I'm Brian. Nice to meet you in person.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for connecting all of us.
One thing that I was hoping you would talk a little bit more about was sort of like the male versus female contribution to this. So when I first heard about you, it was because I listened to that podcast.
Yeah.
And on the podcast, you were talking quite a bit about, particularly with the West Canaanites, it seems like most of the Slavic contribution comes from women. We talked a little bit about that here. But even on the old Ashkenazi side, most of the Southern European contribution also comes from women.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind.
No, that's a great topic. It's been known for some time that if you look at Y chromosomal lineages and you look at empty mitochondrial lineages, there is a very obvious trend that you'll see in all Jewish communities that paternal lines tend to be Middle Eastern while maternal lines tend to be local. But the reality is that it is quite complex. mtDNA is only around 16,500 base pairs. That puts a cap on the potential detail we can get from it, compared to the Y chromosome, which is 60 million base pairs. So there's way more we know about Y chromosomal lineages, and so we can generally be more confident in placing their origin. I think a lot of the earlier studies on Ashkenazi mtDNAs, like Costa et al. 2013, were biased simply because their sample size, their reference, was largely European, and so they saw the connections and made their deductions. I think there's a lot still to learn about Mediterranean mtDNAs and determining how much exactly is Northern European, Western European, Southern European, East Mediterranean, Levantine, other Middle Eastern. The truth is that we still have a lot to learn.
So they might be wrong.
So it's I think if you were to like look at the data in its truth, squint really hard, which is what they were doing really because of the science back then, like you could parse those out. So I don't think that they were very wrong to make those claims. Mm-hmm. What I think is the better way to put it, using the data that I know, is that all of these Jewish communities, they evolved over time, and a lot of the diversity is extinct. And so we have a subset of the diversity preserved. And it is true, I think, and well encapsulated, that it is actual that the Eastern European ancestry that we're looking at in the West Canaanites probably did come disproportionately from women. And we know that not only from the population genetics, but also in onomastics, the study of naming patterns. Slavic names for, like female Slavic names were way more common than the male names. Now, of course, you could say that was purely cultural, but it does make sense in the context of Ashkenazi Jews specifically having a lot of Slavic mtDNAs. And it is impressive. Nevertheless, we truly do have a lot to learn, and even though the biggest Ashkenazi mtDNA, K1A1B1A, is not, like the origin of that is not yet known. Its closest connections are with Mediterranean populations. Its closest connection, in fact, is to Tunisian Berbers, to a Tunisian Berber clade. Does that mean it's from North Africa? Not necessarily. But it just shows that we have a lot to learn. Another major Ashkenazi mtDNA lineage, K2A2A1, was only recently found in an ancestral variety in a Mycenaean context. That only came out last year. Previously, Costa et al. Claimed it was German. And so we're still learning so much, especially about mtDNA diversity outside of Western and Northern Europe, which is where so much of our samples are from. Even
Where's
now.
Mycenaean?
Mycenaeans were Bronze Age Greeks. That's the simplest form I could put it. The Mycenaean culture were basically a Proto-Greek speaking culture based out of modern day Greece. Yes?
I grew up in the Jewish section of Detroit during and after the war years, and I remember the adults in the neighborhood, in grocery stores or porches, they seemed to my ears be a cultural prejudice against Ashkenazi Jews. Is that, did you catch any of that in your research?
Yeah, I think it's normal for related groups to pick on each other in some way, as sadly, you know. I think that a lot of people may feel complicated about having only partial shared ancestry, even though the tribal sort of understanding is that all Jews are Jews and we descend from Israelites and we have this history and it's who we are. But for me, someone who likes thinking about ancestry, they're not conflicting definitions. Tribe is wider than population. And it is in fact true that Ashkenazi Jews and Mizrahi Jews, for example, they share some lineages, and they are related still, and they have shared Jewish ancestry. It's just that that ancestry is not a majority anymore, it's a minority of their total ancestry. But it's people come to understandings of difference in their own ways, sadly not always in the healthiest. Yes?
Personally, I'm not that interested in my genealogy, but if I was to do like a DNA test, what would I get out of it, and who would I have to do it?
So assuming that you're of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, if you're not interested in genealogy, that is like determining more of your recent ancestry, finding relatives, stuff like that, but you are a little curious about more ancient origins, or how your results fit in a more historical context, then I would not recommend a autosomal test from 23andMe or Ancestry DNA, because it's going to tell you you're 100% Ashkenazi Jewish, and it's not going to tell you much more information. So I would recommend testing your Y-DNA and your mtDNA, because these are what we use to trace population ancestry at a broader scale. And I have worked through this with so many people. If you test your Y chromosome, usually it's done at Family Tree DNA. If you test your Y chromosome, you'll match a bunch of Ashkenazi Jews, and you can learn about that lineage that you fall into, that all of your matches would fall into. And again, there's a 50% chance that you'll fall into one of these 10. And we're learning more about them every day, and they'll tell you a little bit more about your particular history. For example, didn't mention this in the presentation, but EY6940 and RA11711, these are probably contributions from West Canaanites. All of the others are probably contributions from the Old Ashkenazim. And that helps to demonstrate how much of the bulk, the structured ancestry that's found today in modern Ashkenazim actually descends from the Old Ashkenazim, even though there's still some big contributions from West Canaanites. And so that's an example of something you can learn, but if you're just not that interested, you're just not that interested. There's nothing
If some of us who aren't interested do this, would that give people like you more data? That would be...
The truth is that there is a lot of data out there, and some of this testing can be expensive. I think one of the best ways that if someone's trying to help this research by contributing their own DNA is testing and then uploading it to GenBank. GenBank is the largest repository of human genomes, and it's completely anonymous as well. And you'd only be uploading parts of your genome that could not identify you, such as your Y chromosome. It's like, it's helpful in a population sense. It's not very helpful identifying individuals. And marking that submission as like, this is an Ashkenazi Y chromosome, people who are doing studies on Ashkenazi Jews can find that sample, can use that sample, because it's part of the GenBank database. That's the way that I would say it, but frankly, the GenBank uploading process is a bit of a hassle too. So it's actually, it's not a perfect world for what you're talking about, but thank you, I understand. Yeah.
I'm curious if you know anything about the various companies like 23andMe and Ancestry and their relationship with GenBank. And so when individuals like myself get our DNA analyzed, is that publicly, in a sense, publicly available or academically available?
Yeah, so the truth is that those like companies are not related to GenBank. 23andMe has an opt-in if you want to approve them doing research on your genome, but they don't share your genome with even like government-funded organizations like GenBank that are just trying to have a database. Ancestry is the same thing. And the truth is that like the testing that you'll do at a 23andMe or an Ancestry DNA, it's actually only like little portions of your genome that are just really helpful to determining ancestry in a kind of like a quick way. That's their economic way of doing it. But a true whole genome, or especially what like we were referencing, which is Y chromosomes or mtDNAs, are different, and it's like a different kind of test. And so we're going to be different kind of people who are interested in having
Is that commercially available?
it. Which,
Either of those?
yeah, so what we were talking about in terms of like Y chromosomes, for example, like I use Y chromosomes in my work. Yes, they are commercially available. I think some of the best ways to get your Y chromosome tested is just to get a whole genome sequence, because they're getting cheaper and cheaper. And it not only gives you the Y chromosome, but you get your whole genome as well, including your mitochondria.
Who does that?
So Nebula is the company I often use because they have the cheapest prices right now. But the truth is that there are tons of whole genome sequencing companies. Nevertheless, the most popular company for uniparental testing, which is Y-DNA and mtDNA, is Family Tree DNA. The reason why is they have a great database of matches. You can see matches and you can learn more because of that, but they make you pay more for access to that database. Yeah.
One more question.
No, please, I really appreciate
Can
it.
I ask you to engage in some wild, irresponsible speculation?
Yeah, that's what I'm here for, in
Alright,
fact.
best guess, won't hold you to it. Why?
Tell you what,
do you think caused, sorry,
Is this
this
a
related-
long question?
This is not a long question.
Okay, we'll make that the last question. We
What-
can answer questions.
What do you think
Otherwise
caused,
after.
if you had to guess, what do you think caused the demographic explosion? So the two groups came together. Do you have any idea of like what mechanism caused the population to explode?
Yeah, so the biggest, I think, impetus is that if we look in the legal history and the settlement history of these lands and read books like by Antony Polonsky, who talked about the Jews in the early Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which is where a lot of this growth was happening. It's intriguing to me that like around the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, early 16th centuries, a bunch of laws were passed in Germany restricting Jewish settlement. Poland, the Kingdom of Poland, was wide open for Jewish settlement and encouraged it via a kind of collaboration with Polish nobility. As the Polish nobility in that particular structure of Polish government was gaining a lot of power, a lot of administrative sort of like side power was given to Jews who were seen as the nobles' property. They weren't the property of the king, even, the property of the nobles, and not of the towns, but the nobles. And they gave them a lot of freedom, and it gave them economic opportunities, and it encouraged migration to new towns founded by nobles, or nobles wanting to compete with other nobles by having Jews. And basically what happened was that there was never a mass migration, but it was such an opening of opportunities that a population that was forming together, establishing a new culture for itself, a new way of being, was perfectly positioned to seize that opportunity. And they wouldn't have known that they could have kept spreading into Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine, and their population could have kept growing. And of course, they couldn't have anticipated the Industrial Revolution and the capabilities that had of creating population growth. But I think really it was serendipity and chance, and that's what I will say. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is race versus culture. Are Jews a race or a culture, and how would you add Black Jews into that picture? How does all that integrate?
Yeah, the truth is that I think Judaism is all of those, and that we can create a definition that's embracing enough to recognize that there are modern people today who are deeply devout in Jewish ways and wanting to participate in Jewish culture and future Jewish nationhood, and want to continue doing that. And I don't think these historical understandings should make that harder. Nevertheless, we must understand that for most of Jewish history, Jewishness was not separate from ethnicity, it wasn't separate from ancestry. you were Jewish because your parents were Jewish and raised you Jewish, and their parents were Jewish. And in recognizing that across the world, Jewish communities most Jewish communities genuinely have real Israelite and Judean ancestry. It's not most of their ancestry, but for Ashkenazi Jews, for example, I would guess something like 30%, 35% maybe. That's still significant, and it's meaningful as Jews are trying to, especially in Israel, trying to understand, like, how could an Ashkenazi be related to a Mizrahi? But the truth is that they are related in some way, and someone who's a black Jew is probably not descending from one of these communities. They probably converted relatively recently, whether they did or their parents did or whatever.
They're Ethiopians. They're the Ethiopians, right?
Ethiopian Jewish ancestry is a unique story. I was actually discussing this just last week with my friends. The truth is actually that Ethiopian Jews, while they are of course fully accepted as Jews today in Israel, descend from a context of basically Judaizing a Ethiopian Christian culture. In Ethiopia, there's a lot more ideas of Israelite ancestry. Think of like the Solomonic dynasty that ruled Ethiopia. They see themselves as of the descendants of Israel. And the Ethiopian Jews, or Beta Israel, derive from that context. And in fact, we can see in their population genetics and just straight up in their like ethnography and their anthropological studies that have been done on that population, that they became more normatively Jewish a lot in the last century. And before that, it was very difficult to tell who is a Israelite aspiring Ethiopian Christian and who is Beta Israel. So that actually is a complicated story. But you said that we wanted to open the door and get some refreshments, but I'm still available for some questions.